see. We are live. All right. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Johnson. I'm the God Right Chairman for Petersburg Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Tonight we have with us the illustrious Dr. Shedrick McCall, Associate Psychology Professor from Virginia State University, and we'll be discussing some mindful matters tonight. So, Dr. McCall, I am going to turn it over to you.
All right, awesome. Glad that you all chose me to speak regarding, so speaking to parents about, their children and mental health. And we know that, with the COVID going on, with the state of the economy, the politics, a lot of this has exacerbated many of our mental health. And when we're looking at our children on decision whether they should go to school, stay at home, and they're not in their familiar environment and things of that nature, is definitely affecting our children. So how I wanted to start is I wanted to talk about what is mental health. That's a question that I get a lot of times. And is there a difference between mental health and mental illness? And the answer to that question is yes. So I say to the parents, all our children are going to have some form of mental health issues, but all of our children will not be diagnosed with a mental illness. And that's a critical component for people to understand. When we talk about mental health, we're talking about the emotional, the psychological, and the social well being of an individual. We're talking about how they handle stress, how they relate to others, how our children relate to others, how our children are influenced by others, and how they influence others in regarding their choices and their decisions. And we see that a lot of time in schools. We see that in relationships. And one of the biggest things that affects our children mentally, as far as their mental health, is that peer pressure. And a lot of y'all know that you've been through that peer pressure, the peer pressure of having sex, the peer pressure of cutting school, the weird peer pressure of the kid that's really smart, but he doesn't want to be smart because he doesn't want people to pick on him, the peer pressure of drugs. All those things affect our children. So again, I just want everybody to know that individuals are going to experience mental health. Now, the question I get a lot of times from parents is, what is mental illness? All right. So mental illness is a little different. Mental illness is something that's diagnosed. In psychology, we have a diagnostic and statistical manual 5. We call it the DSM-5. And that's kind of our psychological Bible. And that allows clinicians to communicate. And that's where our diagnoses are at. So what happens when we talk about mental illness is when you move from decision making and choices, that when you start becoming uh, possibly being diagnosed with a mental illness, that's when things start affecting your mood, your thinking, and your behavior. So when things start affecting your mood, your thinking, and your behavior, that's probably when you're going to see somebody, and that's when you're going to get a diagnosis. So just to reiterate that, even as adults, all of us are going to experience mental health problems, just mental health, normal mental health stressors, financial, relationships, jobs. It's just so many things that affect us mental health wise. However, we will not be diagnosed with, a mental illness in most cases. So the question to parents have for me a lot of times is, how do I know my child has a mental health illness? How do I know my child is experiencing some mental health symptoms? What are those symptoms? So a lot of people say, Dr. McCall, well, how would I know? So I just want to talk briefly about some of the symptoms that you may see your child exhibit. And if you see them exhibiting any of these symptoms and it's abnormal or atypical or how they normally would act, then this may be alarming or concerning for you if you think that your child may need some help. So the first thing is if they're sad, a persistent sadness over a period of 2 weeks. Not just because, maybe a fish died or something like that, but a persistent sadness over a period of 2 weeks. Withdrawal. So if they start avoiding social interactions and situations they normally would interact and engage in, that should be a red flag for a parent. That alone is not a red flag, but with a combination of the symptoms that I'm explaining to you, that's definitely a red flag. Again, sadness, that persistent sadness that lasts over 2 weeks, withdrawal and avoidance from social interactions and situations. More importantly, suicidal thoughts. We want to take all suicidal thoughts seriously. We know that some people just cry out for help, but sometimes when they cry out for help and they do things, unfortunately, they may hurt themselves in the midst of crying out for help. So we have to take all suicidal thoughts and ideation serious. If they're just hurting themselves. Now, what I'm seeing is there's a lot of individuals, some of you may have heard of cutting, where they're cutting their wrists, taking cigarettes and burning. They take a pencil eraser and erase on their wrist. Now people are doing it on their legs because that's less visible. So it's a soothing method for them when they're experiencing some mental health issues that they harm themselves. But now they're harming themselves in places that's not visible to the average person. So, we need to be aware of those things. Homicidal thoughts when they think about hurting someone else. We don't think about that a lot of time, but you all know when we had the Columbine situation, you never know what's going on with a child that's being bullied, that has low self-esteem, that has low self-efficacy, and then you culminate that with mental health, then that child definitely needs to get help because they could have homicidal thoughts, angry outbursts, extremely irritable. So these are a lot of the signs that we can see. So again, when parents say, hey, Dr. McCall, how do I know my child is having some mental health issues? These are some of the signs. And just to finish a couple of more, because I think it's very important that we let the parents know what are some of these signs so that if they're seeing them in their child, if they're seeing them in a nephew, a niece, or family members, or people in the community that they are close to, they can recognize some of these signs. Other signs: increase or decrease in eating, increase or decrease in their sleep pattern, an increase or decrease in their weight. All of these are signs that there could be something going on with a child. Difficulty concentrating, a decrease in their academic performance. So if they were making straight A's or A's and B's, and now they're making C's and D's or even F's, that could be alarming because that means something could be, going on. We see that a lot right now with COVID, with the virtual, because a lot of kids are not comfortable in a virtual setting and it's not conducive for them to learn for some of them because they get too comfortable at home. And, we see kids walking away from the computer, doing things. So a lot of times, that difficult concentrating and the decrease in academic performance is very relevant. A lack of interest in events that they normally like to do. So if they like to play basketball, I heard you all say, Brother Price, you got the activity program. So if you got a kid that loves sports and then all of a sudden they stop coming, they no longer want to participate, that could be a red flag that it may be something going on at home that's hindering them from coming out and being a part of what they really want to be a part of. So that could be a red flag. A change in mood. And finally, one thing that we sometimes don't look at is the physiological effects that affect children, such as children can get headaches, they can have dizziness, they can have digestion problems, they can have stomach problems, they can have that lump in their throat, they can have excessive sweating. These are all signs that a child may be experiencing some mental health issues. Um, so then parents say to me, well, once I know the difference between mental health and mental illness, and once I can identify some of the symptomologies or signs that they will exhibit, then what should I do? What should I do when I see these things and I suspect that my child may have mental health issues? What do I do? So I tell parents all the time, it's very simple. These are not the only 4 steps, but these are 4 steps that have been, useful for me in talking to parents who have children with mental health issues. The first thing is to, talk to the child, talk to the teachers, talk to their friends, other family members, and see if they're noticing some of the changes or some of the signs that you see. And if they're noticing that, then that's a red flag because it's not only you seeing it, but it's also somebody else seeing it. and is atypical of abnormal of the behavior that they would normally exhibit. Number two is that um, talk to the primary care physician. So your primary care physician is not a clinician, but they can do some early screening, some preliminary screening for things like ADHD, for things like autism, things like anxiety and depression. And they can do an evaluation. And if needed, they may can give some medication, and then they can give you a referral to a psychiatrist. And so I often tell people a psychologist is going to do the talk therapy and the diagnosing. The psychiatrist is the MD that's going to give the medicine to the child. So again, once you refer to the primary care physician, they can do some screening. And once they do that screening and evaluation, they can give medication and then refer. For those of you who have insurance, then a lot of times you can just check your insurance and see what your mental health coverage is and what your copay is, and just call somebody in your network and get help for the child. And sometimes, unfortunately, people do not have um, insurance and access. So I tell them to refer to their local Department of Family Services, their local Department of Social Services, and their county mental health. And a lot of times, those individuals, they have sliding scales, or those organizations or offices have sliding scales for individuals who may not have the financial resources to receive help for mental health. So those are some of the things you should do once you realize that your child is exhibiting, some of those symptoms. All right. So once you refer them, the big question is, well, what happens next? So once I found out that my child has this mental health issue and I done referred them somewhere, what should I expect? So what you should expect is that we try to rule out any physiological problems, because we know sometimes some of the physiological problems, the headaches, back pain, anything that's associated, it could be physical and not psychological. So you want the child to get a complete medical, physical or medical exam. We look at their medical history. Um, we look at the family history of trauma. We know that trauma definitely impacts children, because trauma is those things that are distressing and disturbing and exceeds our ability to cope with, and they are traumatic. So we definitely look at the trauma, because trauma is one of the number one things that hinders or exacerbates mental health in children. We do a review of symptoms that the parent come and tell us. So we'll review those symptoms. So like I said, if they sleeping too much, sleeping too little, they irritable, we'll review all those symptoms with the parents. We'll do a timeline for their, physical and psychological development, and watch their progression or regression. We talk about their academic history. We do a interview with the parents, and if needed, we'll go on to do some psychological testing, have some conversations and interviews with the child. And then that's when we'll give a diagnosis. And once we give the diagnosis, whatever that diagnosis may be, it could be depression, it could be bipolar, it could be ADHD, disruptive behavior disorder, conduct disorder. There's just a number of psychological disorders that could happen. So once we do that, we develop a treatment plan, because we don't want to just diagnose somebody and then not have a plan. All right. Sometimes we call it an individual service plan or a treatment plan. And on that, we'll have the prognosis and the steps, systematic steps that we want you to go through and meet at certain goals. So we have your intervention, your objectives, your goals, short term and long term, so that we can help you deal with those mental health issues. Um, I know there's a lot of information, but I think given what we are going through now, we really have to look at our children, and we really have to make sure that our children are okay, because this is a time where I've seen, unfortunately, African American kids or Black kids between the ages of 10 and 19, suicide is the second leading cause of death for them right now. So it's a very serious, um, situation in our communities, and we want to decrease those things and increase more of that positivity within our children. So now that you kind of, know what happens next, and you sent your child, the last thing that I talk about before we open it up for questions is, once I know that my child has been diagnosed, what can I do to help them? What can I do? Can I help them? A lot of parents, sometimes they feel helpless. If they found out their child got depression, they may blame it on themselves, projection. So what we want to know is, what can I do? So I tell parents, just 7 steps. Um, I'm a big believer in educating you and letting you know what you need to do so you don't have to guess. And then you can add to it, but you have a baseline and you can know what you need to do to help your child. Learn about the illness, educate yourself about that particular illness or disorder that your child may have. Um, get family counseling, get all the people that's involved with their child into family counseling, because a diagnosis can change the dynamics of the family setting. So I think that everybody in the family should understand, what's going on with the child and how it's affecting the child. Ask the provider, ask the clinician, when my child is out of control, what are some of the things I can do that's effective to help them come back into control? Because a lot of times you may not know, and many of the providers, such as myself, have seen thousands of kids, and we have thousands of interventions that have been effective for children. Um, number 4 is parent education. It's definitely, you got to educate yourself, and you can go to parent groups with parents that have children with similar diagnosis, similar problems, and you all can talk together and see what's going on. Explore stressful techniques, because the reason I say that is because if you get a child that has a psychological disorder, mental illness, it's stress on you. So you got to find a way to alleviate and decrease your stress so that you can be effective for your child. Because what we find in the field a lot of times is that when um, people find out that their child have a psychological disorder, and a lot of times parents kind of lose control sometimes and may not realize that it's the disorder that's making that child exhibit that behavior. It's not the child. So you have to be careful how you discipline the child and make sure it's consistent with their disorder. And I think one of the two of the final things I say before I open it up for questions is that I think we have to relax and have fun and get to know our children and let them know that we love them. I think that's very important. And that helps build a child's self-esteem. It builds their self-concepts, their beliefs about themselves. It builds their self-efficacy, believing that they can do whatever they set their mind to do. And of course, it builds their self-esteem. And then finally, when you have a child that has a disorder and they're exhibiting positive behaviors, and you need to positively reinforce them and praise them so that hopefully those behaviors that were negative can be extinguished, and the behaviors that they're exhibiting that's positive through the positive reinforcement and praise will continue to shine. So that's kind of a nutshell on how we deal with our children with mental health issues. Right? So does it, and I just kind of open it up now. Does anybody have any questions? I know I talked for a while, but I thought that it was important that we get those things out.
So
Well,
I
McCall.
have
Well,
I have a question.
go ahead.
So as mentors of middle schoolers and high schoolers, what can we do to support the families, the parents that are going through issues during this pandemic? And when I say support the parents, my premise is that the parents need the same support that the kids do before they can actually put the kids in our care for us to do what we do.
Yeah. So I think one of the things you're doing right now, you are allowing them to participate and get educated on some things and kind of understand, the mental health side. Other things is just being supportive of the parent, encouraging of the parent, being a listening ear for the parent, providing structure for the kids. So as you indicated, when they leave the house, they can come to you for structure, and that you and the parent are on the same page. Talk to the kid. And if they're disrespecting mom or dad, that's the role of a lot of times coaches. You can talk to them, because you and I know that I played sports forever, and that kids really respect what coaches say. So, and I tell coaches all the time is that word coach is a big word, because kids really hang on what a coach says. And you all know it. If a kid is in practice and they do something that the coach doesn't like and the coach yells at him or something, sometimes a kid will quit, but it's that kid that has never really played, but the coach continues to encourage him and that kid stays on the team. So there's a lot of things that you could do, but I think just supporting them, providing resources for them, letting them know that you're a listening ear for them. That's just some of the things that you can do that I would recommend that you do to help the parent in these situations. Because, right now with this pandemic, we have unfortunately 11.5 million have been diagnosed with COVID. 300,000, 285,000 deaths. So it's really tough out here right now for everybody.
Got it.
Hey, Dr. McCall, I got a question for you.
Yes,
Like,
sir.
how do our kids deal with the stereotype of just the thought of being able to communicate with a professional, to talk about some of the issues they may be even dealing with? You know what I'm saying? Just the image of it all. Young people, that's really important to them. So, how do we kind of, steer them in that direction to let them know that that's kind of really a safe zone and that the things that they share is very
Confidential.
protected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I tell kids all the time, when you come to me, everything is confidential except really just two things. If you're gonna hurt yourself or hurt somebody else, then I got to report it. But other than that, everything else is confidential. I think that there's always, especially in the Black community, has been a stigma of weakness if you're going to see somebody. And what I try to tell people now, especially men, is that if you don't mind your mind and take care of yourself, then you're no good for nobody else. And I think that it's time for us to kind of put that aside. And given everything that's going on in this country, as we've seen George Floyd, that had a psychological effect on many of us, and how we see and view the police, given the pandemic and people dying. So I think what we have to do is help them understand that, it's okay that you're not weak. You don't need to man up. You need to get help. And I think we just need to be supportive and encouraging and let them know that sometimes you have to go to a professional to get help about what's going on in your life. And one of the things I give them is if you break your finger, you see that it's broken and you go get help and you can see it heal. And it's the same thing. So if your heart is broken, if your mind is not working like you think, then you need to go get help and let that heal to the best of its ability so that you can be effective and accomplish the goals and achieve the things in life that you want to achieve, and you can be a positive person.
So, Dr. McCall, so how do you get to the root of it? Because sometimes I think that depression and things of that nature is contagious. Either it's from the child to the parent, or a lot of times from the parent to the child. So how do you get to the root of what may be causing this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when we look at the etiology of the cause of depression, um, the first thing is that we know, especially in African American communities and Black communities, that our children experience vicarious trauma. So we learn trauma through our parents. I mean, that's just the way it is. Number two is that I tell people uh, in Black families, uh, I say it like this to people: the dysfunctional setting that we grew up in is the only functional setting that we know. So many of us don't even realize we're growing up in a dysfunctional setting. So some people don't realize that they're poor and things like that. But going back strictly to the question of depression, I think that when we do, as I indicated, when we do intake, then we're going to talk to the parents and find out if there's a family history of depression, because we know the genetics definitely plays a role in depression. So if there's a family history of depression, then there's highly likely when that child comes to us through testing, through talking, then we'll definitely see that depression could be genetics, a predisposition, and so definitely we do review of the family history, just like when you go to the medical doctor and if you got a heart condition, they want to know if your mother, your father has it. It's the same thing with us. Is there a history of depression in your family? Is there a history of bipolar in your family? Is there a history of schizophrenia in your family? Is there a history of anybody being hospitalized psychologically, psychiatrically? So those are the things that we look at, and to find out if it's just the child, or it's a family history. And I would say this without any empirical study, that most of the depression that children experience definitely comes from, something that happens in the household.
Dr. McCall, we've had a number of kids to run away from home. Is the problem, that would dictate that a kid in his mindset would leave home? Is the problem with the kid or is it with the parent?
I think it's a combination of both. I think that some people run away because they're being abused, they're being neglected, and they're being traumatized. And at home, it's just too much. It has too much negative stimulus for them to stay there. And you all heard of flight, fight, or freeze. And those are the physiological responses that we have. And so sometimes kids flight, they run because they're not safe in that setting. And I think they really learn that they're not safe as they grow in chronological age. Then sometimes it's because they don't want to follow rules and they don't feel like their parents are being fair. And I tell parents a lot of times, we can't be our kids' friend. We got to be their parent. We can't be their friend. We got to be the parent. And when you start blurring those lines of friend and parent, that's when you're going to have problems with kids. Our kids shouldn't be sitting down at the table smoking and cursing and drinking with us. We're the parent and we need to maintain that. And, that's just a side note, but those are some of the things. So I think that kids, run away for different reasons. Again, they run away because they don't feel safe in the household, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, trauma, no lights, no water, different things like that. Sometimes they run to safety. And I tell teachers all the time, sometimes kids feel safer in the school than they do at home, because at school, they're going to get meals, they're going to have heat, they can use the bathroom, and they're safe. They feel safe. Where sometimes in some of these communities, I got a young man I work with in Gilpin Court, and on the news probably about 3 months ago, I don't know if you all seen, but somebody just jumped out of the back of a truck, and two guys, and they shot over 100 times, and they found 100 shell casings. And him and his family is just sitting at home, have nothing to do with it. And a bullet came through the front window and the side window of his brother's house. So, that's definitely a traumatic situation. So can you imagine that anytime you hear a noise, a banging, and you sitting at home, that's traumatizing for children. Yeah. So going to school is a safety zone for them, and coming home sometimes is not.
Hey, Dr. McCall, I got one other question. Are there any treatable solutions without medication for working with our young people who may be diagnosed with depression and or anxiety?
Most definitely. A lot of people, as you know, not to make the correlation, but a lot of people not going to take the vaccine when they come out for COVID. And a lot of people don't believe in medication. Now, in my time, I've seen a kid that really had ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I've seen them with and without medication. It's a big difference. All right. So I think that medication is effective. Is medication overused? Yes. But medication is effective. So the question is, can they be treated without medication? Of course. Behavior modification programs. Talking to them, holding them accountable, giving them positive feedback, being there for them to talk to you. And the biggest thing I found is just that structure. Kids need structure, and a lot of times when they don't have structure, their little brains are still developing, so they make decisions that's not the best, and they don't realize that those decisions have consequences. So even if you're depressed and you don't have nobody to talk to, and you make your own decisions, you may cut yourself. It's a lot of different things that a person could do that's negative. So just talking to them, having structure, being supportive, putting them in groups, getting them involved in extracurricular activities, helping them with their homework, telling them that you love them, just building up their self-esteem so that, they'll feel comfortable and confident in themselves. If you have a young lady, like your daughter, somebody, tell her she's beautiful, you love her. If you have a son, one of the things I found over the years is that men don't tell their sons a lot of times that they love them and don't hug them. And you don't realize that, sometimes their self-esteem get low and they need that encouragement, and they need that touch from their father, their uncle, or even a coach.
So I have a question. Speaking of that, when you talk about that, so what do you say to a kid that they're in a single parent household and through the pandemic they haven't been able to see one parent or the other because of that?
Yeah, that's tough. You know, I think that's why I tell parents, because I've been on a radio show. That's why I tell parents they have to be honest with the child, and they have to educate that child and let them know the ramifications of the pandemic. Let them know the ramifications of the COVID, and then try to find other outlets if possible. You know, for example, if a kid, say for instance, if a father is locked up, then we know right now because of the COVID that they can't go see their father physically. So maybe you can make more phone calls. Maybe you can send letters. Maybe you can do a Zoom. Maybe you can find alternative methods in that child to see them. And the parent is in the house. Stay encouraging and stay supportive. Don't down that other parent because you really hurting the child because you're grown and the other parent is grown. So you don't want to hurt the child. You want to be supportive and encouraging of the child. The two of y'all made them. So even though y'all don't get along, it's still a product of you two. So you got to really be supportive of the other parent. But that is definitely a tough situation. And it's going to take a lot of nurturing, a lot of care, a lot of understanding, and a lot of talking to so that child knows that the other parent still loves them and care, but due to this situation, they can't see that parent. And you can show them the statistics in Virginia. You can show them the statistics nationally on how this COVID is affecting people and how they're saying, keep gathering small, stay away from traveling and things of that nature to help soothe them more or less.
Quick question there, Dr. McCall. So, talking about, really being super supportive to the kids, uh, reinforcing, positivity in them, so much so that I guess my question is, how do you continue to do that, even when that positivity creates a stigma with them where they're afraid to approach you when things happen or when they get in trouble. And they don't want to disappoint you because you've instilled so much, or you what's the word I'm looking for? They don't want to let you down. So how do you maintain that positivity, that positive role, and be approachable to them when things happen? Because I noticed that some kids don't want to let you down. So when things happen, it could be something with drugs or a relationship or anything. So they internalize it, and that weighs it down on them. And so now you the encouraging person, you're no longer approachable because they don't want to let you down.
Right. Those are all tough situations, and there's no one right answer. And I say that to everybody. There's no one right answer. There's many means to the end. I think the first thing is that you have to have a good relationship with your child, and you have to understand what you can and you can't say to them. So a lot of times you should see things that's going on with them, but you don't necessarily have to discuss every negative thing that you see in a negative way. You could play, I tell people I play mind games with my son a little bit. So every point is not a point that you have to confront. But I think that if the child is using illicit drugs, if they're drinking, and you see these things, um, the positive, is kind of out right now. And now the parental and nurturing comes in. And I don't really care if you don't like me or not, because I'm not telling you anything to hurt you. I'm telling you things that can help you. And I don't have to put my hands on you. I don't have to curse at you. I don't have to yell at you, because you all know that children have different temperaments. Some kids can handle some things and some kids can't, you know. So you really have to just sit down and talk to them and, tell them the consequences that potentially could come with some of the things that they're doing, how it could negatively impact their life. Some things could become criminal, and you just have to talk to them. And I tell people all the time now, two of the hardest things in the world to be as a parent and a black man. You know, those two of the hardest things in the world to be, a parent and a black man. So parents don't come with instructions. You know, we could say basic instructions before leaving Earth, which is the Bible, and you can read it and you can pray for your child. But unfortunately, They don't come with an instruction manual. So you just kind of learning on the go, and you doing the best that you can, and you want to build that relationship with them, and you just want to be as encouraging as possible, but you want to be able to teach them, so when you're long gone, they're still able to follow the what you taught them.
Dr. McCall, I don't have as much of a problem with my kids as I do with their parents. Their parents are struggling big time in this new normal. The kids adapt to anything. Parents are having a real hard time adapting to having kids at home all day, trying to work, trying to look out for them, trying to help them with their homework when the kids know more about the subject matter than they do, and they're stressed out. So what advice do we give parents to try to keep them sane as we go through this quote unquote new normal?
Mm-hmm.
I've got some very unbelievably strong parents who are struggling right now.
So I think for parents, it is tough.
Yeah.
So just a couple of different things. When it comes to the academics and the educations, I think that you need a parent support group. And I think within that parent support group, you need subject matter experts. What I mean by that is that I'm not good at math. So I need to have a group of parents where there's somebody that's good at math. And then maybe they can help my child. Because we know that if you try to help your child with math and you get frustrated, they get frustrated, it's not going to end well.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that parents need an outlet too, whether it's taking a walk, sitting on the porch, listening to music. You got to find a place for hopefully you got enough space. And we know that sometimes people don't have a lot of space, but enough space where you can separate from time to time and have your time and they can have their time. But unfortunately, for parents to have multiple children and they're not used to it, it's definitely a situation that's impacting them, but you just got to make the best of it and to do the best you can. And as I indicated, there's no right answer. You just got to figure out what works for your household and what's conducive for your household. But, having subject matter experts to help your children, having parent support groups that you can talk to, because they may be having the same problem that you're having, and they may have some advice that they can give you that you never thought of. Being able to, get in your car, and if it's just driving up and down the block to get away, take a walk through the neighborhood, just some of those things.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yes, sir.
It's tough.
I would like to hear some of the questions that some of the parents have, because I know a lot of us have been dealing with a lot of death since this whole pandemic has been going on. I know in the last 2 weeks, personally, 4 people passing. So I would love to hear from some of the parents what their perspective is of having to deal with their kids and explaining to them and talking to them about death and their mental health through all of this crisis.
See, you have so many questions, then when you get on here, you kind of lose focus of the questions. Because I think I've given a lot of information also, but as Brother Johnson said, I don't proclaim to know it all, but I've been doing it for 25 years and working with kids, and I feel that I've been pretty effective with it. And the same way I tell you all to have a support group. I have a support group of clinicians that I talk to because, as I indicate, I don't have all the answers. And, I have two children, one 21 and one 4. And I struggle. I struggle. My 21-year-old, he's a boy, and my 4-year-old, she's a girl. And that 21-year-old, he's finding himself, and uh, as Brother Jamal said, a lot of times he feels like he has to live up to some of the things that I've done, so you really have to talk to him. And the thing that we really have to know now, parents, is more than ever, we have to talk to our kids. We have to understand their mind state. We need to know what they're going through. And if this just start with small talk, then you got to do it because it's just so much going on right now. Had a 9-year-old that hung himself. I had a 16-year-old that got shot. Had another 16-year-old that shot himself. Had last week I put up my god sister, her son, he was 32. He died in his sleep of sleep apnea. He has a 9-year-old son that he had custody of. So his dad is abruptly taken away from him forever, and he can't see him. So it's a lot of stuff going on, and so it's just tough out here. And I think that we all could use somebody to talk to and to process our feelings with and things of that nature. But we definitely have to be supportive and understanding and talking to our kids. We've had, with the political escapade that has going on, I think that we need to talk to our kids about that and help them understand the importance of getting involved and understanding the political platforms and how they can affect you as far as jobs, school, medical, all those things. So it's time that we begin to educate our kids and just help them out. And so I know it's tough for everybody.
I think one of the big challenges is just like you said, even us as mentors and parents, just staying relatable and approachable, so that we can get into the weeds of what's going on with the kids, so that they feel like they can, approach us with issues. I try to tell kids, look, whatever you may be experiencing or about to experience, we've done it tenfold. Been there, done that, got the keychain, mailed the postcards, all that type stuff. So it's not new. It's just it's something you just have to be upfront with, and you'll find that you're not the only one going through it.
Yeah, they almost see us like immortal figures that they don't believe that we've ever gone through anything, and
Right.
and it's tough, especially from a father to a son and maybe a mother to a daughter, because not only can we sympathize, but we can empathize with them because we've been in his shoes. And I told my son the other day, I thought I said something that was very philosophical. I told him that, a lot of times they don't listen. And I said to him, I said, you're 21 years old. I said, son, I can never die at 21, but you might not live to be 50. So you need to listen to me. You understand what I'm saying? You need to listen to me because I've lived past 21. I'm not going to die at 21. And, I pray nothing happens to him, but our kids need to listen and they need to understand that we have wisdom, we have knowledge, we have life experience, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time, but sometimes, they want to. Y'all know that as parents, they want to, but we just got to be there for them. It's tough. It is tough.
Dr.
Great point.
McCall.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't know if it's really, I guess, a question, just a point to be made. So I've got 3 kids. I've got a 22, 20, and my high school. He's headed into high school. I guess talking to him, I think my husband and I have kind of tried to make sure that he's staying, on, above water, having a conversation with him because, he's not in school. Well, he's in school, but he's not there. He's an athlete. And so they're just starting to get him back. I guess my real concern is, I think that we're relating to him, but how do, like, as as an adult, I guess I'm a teacher also. I feel like I'm struggling to stay above water, and I have a great support group as far as the organization. But if we're talking about talking to someone professionally, how do we steer ourselves in that direction? To be able to sit down with someone and really open up professionally and privately about, how we're feeling every day.
Yeah. So I think that I always tell people that everybody's going to experience some form of anxiety or stress. But when it really exceeds your ability to cope with, that's when you need to see somebody. When you see that it's affecting your work or affecting you and the things that you do, when it's affecting your family, when it start doing that, that's when you probably need someone to talk to. And I tell people, I'm a counseling psychologist. So a lot of times what I mean by that is that normal people have normal problems, and you just need to process them with somebody to help you understand that other people are going through the same things that you are going through. And that's why I think it's very important that we seek out someone to talk to, whether it's through telehealth, given COVID, whether it's through finding someone that you can go talk to, face to face, just to process your feelings, not necessarily because you have a mental illness, but to process your feelings and to help you make decisions that's going to be effective and conducive for your life, for your family, for your vocation, and for your well-being. So I think those are the things that we have to look at, that we have to take care of ourselves, because again, as a mother of three, if you don't take care of yourself, then you're going to be no good for them. And the confidentiality is always there when you go talk to a professional. It's always there. And it's different. You have therapists from a humanistic standpoint, is a non-invasive treatment that we use, where people just come talk to us and they talk their own problems out, and we don't say anything to them really. They just need a sounding board, but they need a professional sounding board that has a therapeutic orientation and not just a subjective opinion. And I think that's what we need to look at. So I think once you begin to talk about thinking you need to see somebody, I think that's when a person needs to see somebody. And maybe it's just one time. It's called brief therapy. Maybe it's 1 or 2 times and then you're okay, or that person is okay. Or sometimes when you go to therapy, we look at things that people have repressed and some of the trauma that they have repressed, and then things start coming up. And it's kind of like taking an aspirin when you got a headache. From a psychological standpoint, when you got a headache, you take an aspirin, you begin to feel better. From a psychological standpoint, when you talk to somebody, you begin to feel better. They are your pill. You understand what I'm saying? Without medication, they're your pill. You begin to feel better. So I think that talk therapy is great. I think that many people could use it and utilize it. And I think once you overcome the resistance and the fear, which is not uncommon, the resistance and the fear is not uncommon. So I think given everything that's going on right now, we all could use somebody to talk to. Even if you talk to your pastor, I don't know if you all attend church or not or anything, but even if you feel comfortable talking to a pastor, there's a lot of times we don't like talking to certain friends, and the things that you said to them end up coming back to you. So you want to talk to somebody in confidence. Any other questions? Everybody okay? Any other questions or anything?
So we get to call and talk to you for free though, right?
Yes, sir. Got it, Newt. Well, I ain't gonna charge you nothing but a meal. That's it.
Oh, you know better than that.
So how would a parent, if they wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to contact you if they needed a consultation or they needed a sounding board?
Okay, so I'm on all social media platforms at Shedrick McCall, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'm on if you Google my name, it come right up. And of course, my phone number is always available. I put it in the chat. I don't mind anybody calling me at all. I definitely love, helping our children and watching them grow and develop and become, better young men and women.
Let me ask you a quick question then, Scott, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Just one more quick question. What's your advice to us as untrained mental health professionals when we're approached by someone with a mental health issue that
So I always
needs
tell people,
an immediate answer
yeah,
or
I
response?
always tell people that's really tough because if you're not trained, then you can open up that can of worms that you're not ready to open up. For example, if somebody, I talk to them all the time when I was at the group home and things like that. If somebody is suicidal or they've been abused and they start talking to you about it, and then all those feelings come up, and now they want to hurt themselves, and you're not trained and you don't know what to do, call crisis, things like that. It's tough. So I tell people to keep two things. I tell you, keep kid gloves and stay within your comfort zone. And that's the best advice that I can give you because I don't know what your comfort zone is, and so I don't want to tell anybody. But individually when you coming out of your comfort zone, hey, that's you hear the thing when people say that's above my pay grade, you know. So we know when we're coming out of our comfort zone. So kid gloves, hey, what's going on with you? Have you talked to anybody? How can I help you today? I'm not a professional, but I listen to you. Maybe you need to go talk to somebody. So those are the things that don't leave them hanging, but give them as much as support as you can, and then encourage them to seek help. You know.
So let me ask this question because I know some people don't know the difference. What is the difference between psychology and psychiatry?
Okay. So I'm a psychologist. So a psychologist nationally, in order to be called a psychologist, you have to have a doctorate degree. So that's normally a PhD, a PsyD, or like I have an EDD, a Doctorate of Education in Counseling Psych. So a psychologist is a person that usually diagnose and do prognosis. So we'll diagnose you with depression, and then we'll walk you through the depression. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor and they prescribe medication. So they go to medical school. And normally what they do, we refer you to them. Once we give them, say for instance, if I diagnose you as bipolar, then you would go to the psychiatrist and get, Escalif or lithium, and then they will follow you from the medical side, and I will follow you from the mind side, psychologically. So that's the difference. One is a doctor of science, and one is a doctor of medicine, psychiatrist.
So our first point of reference as untrained individuals, if a situation came up, as Jamal said, then our point of reference and who we would direct somebody to would be a psychologist first.
Yes, if it's a crisis situation, call 911 and then they
Okay.
would take care of it. But if it's a situation where you're just talking to a person, you could tell them to go to a psychologist first, or you could tell them to go to their primary care physician who can do, like I told you, a little evaluation
Got it.
and then refer them to somebody else.
Okay.
And Dr. McCall, if I could just make a point,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
a public educator, a retired school counselor. In that we're talking to parents and talking with kids how they're doing in crisis. Please utilize what we have in the public school system. We have school psychologists, we have social workers, we have professional school counselors who also can make those referrals, not diagnosis, but make the referrals to appropriate places. I just think that point is very necessary. And even from an adult perspective, whatever organization you work with through that HR office has some type of help for folks dealing with issues. I know Lex had mentioned, and I know Lex in the school system, and I know in all school systems, when there's an issue, even with Falcon staff, through our HR office, we can find the necessary help to help even the adult. So there's help out there. Um, and I would just say this historically, us, you know what I'm talking about. We don't ask for help, especially Black men. we'll just take it to the grave. We don't ask for help. So we got to get out of that stigma of asking for help. My daughter, who's in Atlanta working professional, she just called me the other day. Well, we talk every day. It was interesting. She said, Dad, I'm getting therapy. I'm like, what's wrong with you? She said, oh, I just, through my job, they offer therapy. And sometimes I have anxiety. I get nervous about different projects I'm working on. And I just need somebody to talk to. Wow, that's pretty neat. So at 24, she sees a therapist every week. But it's through her job, and the job pays for it, and insurance pays for it.
Normally they call it, as you indicated, it's employment assistance program. And definitely it's helpful, and for the kids, as you indicated, a lot of times they have school counselors, and they have psychologists in the school system, and now they have even some therapeutic day treatment programs that come into the schools and work one-on-one with the children.
Definitely, yeah. I'm with Virginia Beach Schools, so yeah, definitely.
Yes, sir.
For Dr. McCall and Eric, I guess as a Hampton City Schools employee, I know that we have a program available, but I guess in the back of my head, I always worry that my conversation, because it's connected through the school system or provided through the school system, that my conversation there is somehow documented in my work file. Are you, either of you, able to speak more about how confidential that information really is when you go see someone through your employer?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think, like, if something happens to you at work and then they refer you, then it's still going to be confidential, but somebody's going to know that you're going to see somebody. However, you can look at the back of your insurance card and call yourself, and the school never has to know anything about it, and it's confidential. We are sworn, we're mandated reporters, and outside of suicide and homicide, it's pretty much nothing you can tell me that it can't even be subpoenaed by the court. you know. The only way it's subpoenaed by a court if it's, again, a murder case, or, sometimes child support cases like that. I mean, not child support, child custody cases, if it's detrimental to the child. So you don't have to worry too much about the confidentiality. You don't even have to go through the school, but the program is there for you through your insurance, like Brother Eric said.
We have a comment in the chat asking if you can expound upon the being able to go to your primary care physician as a first step.
Yeah. So usually children is under the age of 18 years old have a primary care physician, and under 18, we call them pediatricians. And so when a child is having some problems, and the parent don't necessarily know what's going on right away, the first person to go to is the primary care physician, so that they can just do a screening. That's just a safety outlet for you. You find that a lot of times with kids that may be autistic, when they get to 3 years old and they have a regression, and they no longer speaking and things like that, you don't necessarily rush them to a psychologist. You could take them to the primary care physician. If they're exhibiting behavior that's consistent with ADHD or ADD, they can go to the primary care physician and get medication and a screening. And if that works, that's fine. If it doesn't, they're able to refer you out to the right people. And again, you don't have to go there first, but in quick situations, that's just a person that you could go to that can help you right away. The best thing to do is, as I told Mrs. Alexis, is to look at the back of your insurance card and call and see what mental health services your insurance can provide for you. And therefore, you eliminate the middleman, and you go straight through your insurance to whoever the provider is that can help you for mental health services.
Right. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. McCall, for taking the time out today and having this session with our parents. And we're looking forward to tomorrow's session with the kids. That's going to be interesting to see what type of interaction we have with that. But again, I thank you for taking time out your schedule today to speak with everyone. And that will conclude everything for tonight. And again, as he said, you can find him on all social media platforms. Just look up Shedrick McCall.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And Bro Johnson,
Yes, sir.
I just want to thank you for the way that you've been sharing the resources that you guys have available to you up in Petersburg with everyone. I think
Yes,
that's
sir.
really great, and we really appreciate it. We're getting ready to send our kids on the virtual Virginia State tour. I'm not sure we got that from you, but we're going to be sending them on that tour, and we're looking forward to that. But we really appreciate. We see all of the traffic that you guys have going up there, and we really appreciate the resources that you're providing virtually that we can all take advantage of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No problem. All right. Everybody have a good night.
All right. Thank you. Y'all
All
be
right.
safe. All right.
Thank you.